The Honourable Member for Brome-Missisquoi. Introducing more and more mandatory minimums into the criminal code is increasingly depriving judges of their discretionary power in sentencing. So I would ask my honorary colleague, why does the government insist on going in this direction that has been severely criticized by a number of legal experts?
Member for Brampton-Springdale.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the honourable member for his question. As I mentioned, there was a very detailed consultation done on this private member's bill before this was introduced. I traveled across the country, spoke to thousands of parents, stakeholders, law enforcement agencies, boards of education, and this bill was developed with everyone's input. I don't believe there is anything that we can do which will not help our young children, our youth, our future, in order to protect them. So whether that's minimum mandatory sentences, judges do have the discretion that they can use for a maximum prison time of up to 5 years. But in terms of youth under the age of 18, I believe it is essential that we have minimum mandatory sentences to hold these criminals accountable for their actions who are destroying our youth and ultimately our future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Reprise the débat.
Resuming debate. The Honourable Member for Brome-Missisquoi. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At the outset, I want to announce that the NDP will support this bill, Bill C-394, at second reading. But this isn't a blank check. We will be considering this bill in detail in committee with expert witnesses, and we will examine each clause in Bill C-394 and look at what amendments may be needed. I'm pleased to speak today on Bill C-394, an act to amend the Criminal Code and the National Defence Act. This is a private member's bill that amends the Criminal Code and creates a new offence with respect to organized crime, which is the recruitment of someone for an organized crime organization. There is already a set of rules in the Criminal Code prohibiting criminal organizations, the participation in criminal organization activities, an offense for the benefit of a criminal organization, or charging giving a person directions to commit an offense for such an organization. This bill would add a fourth offense, which would be that of recruiting an individual for a criminal organization as defined in the Criminal Code to increase the ability of such an organization to carry out criminal acts. Through this bill, my honorable colleague would like to reduce the recruitment by gangs. Gangs are criminal organizations that exist across Canada and have done so for decades in Quebec, Nova Scotia, Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and British Columbia. Criminal organizations, these gangs, are growing, and we must do everything we can to combat them. Gangs are changing in how they work, and there are increasing numbers of young people joining them. The members of gangs are often young people from vulnerable socioeconomic backgrounds with family problems. The gangs also target young girls and those who are in prison. I would like to thank my colleague for having introduced this bill that is at least a partial solution to the gang problem. Public safety and security is a priority for the official opposition, and we are always very interested in examining any kind of legislation that would amend the Criminal Code. However, although I acknowledge the legitimacy of this bill sponsored by my colleague, I believe that the penalties under this new provision are inappropriate. The bill calls for a maximum sentence of 5 years and for recruitment of a minor, a mandatory minimum sentence of 6 months. The principle of mandatory minimums is one that has been criticized from a legal point of view because it deprives judges of their discretionary powers, which are fundamental. This penalty would therefore restrict the powers of judges. We feel that we do need to take action against criminal organizations, but this will not be enough to eliminate the problem of gangs and their influence in our society. Prevention is as important as enforcement and repression, and we have to encourage more programs to be set up to help young people who live in cities where gangs are particularly present so that our society can move in a positive direction. We also need to encourage cooperation among the various stakeholders. To illustrate my remarks, I would quote Louis Lacroix, who's responsible for a program dealing with young offenders in Montreal. And he said that all of us were doing good work in our area of expertise, but no one was able to really deal with the gang problem. American studies have shown that a concerted approach within a community is more likely to succeed than any action that is taken in a silo. There are various projects that have been carried out in various provinces, and the federal government, through the National Crime Prevention Center, the schools, the associations, the music industry, various foundations, banks, municipalities, the legal profession, correctional services, and the police have all taken part. It is important to build on these initiatives, and the government should support them. It is essential to provide the funding and the human resources to police officers on the front lines. However, it seems that the current government has failed in this responsibility. It has not taken into account the suggestions made by these professionals who deal every day with street gangs. I would also like to quote the report comparing the approaches used with young people at high risk of being brought into gangs that was made public in 2011. And the report indicated that in 2009 there was a meeting with the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police that led to the recommendation and adoption of a national strategy to deal with gangs. The strategy would help by providing additional police resources so that street gangs could be dealt with. But this strategy has not yet been adopted. This shows that the current government is refusing to provide funding for municipal frontline officers and lacks vision to deal with public security. The Conservatives say that they want to deal with criminal organizations by trying to reduce recruitment of people into gangs, but they are not meeting the needs of our Canadian public. They announced in 2011 that they were going to slash the funding for the activities that tried to fight gangs. The NDP reacted to that and called for prevention programs. And because of the NDP, the Harper government changed its mind and provided funding for the program. The government has disappointed the provinces by not providing enough funding to recruit more frontline police officers. Though the fund was created in 2008, it will expire in 2013. And once again, the Conservatives have not kept their promise. Canadians are expecting that this House will take reasonable steps to meet their expectations, because living in communities without crime and violence is a priority. This bill is a partial solution, but we need a balanced approach between repression and prevention so that our society will be more harmonious. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.